Guys, hope y'all had a great weekend. So, what we're going to do right now is stay on our foundations of government, and we're going to start lesson three. And so, let's talk about the fundamental concepts of democracy. Well, number one, we have an indirect, a representative democracy, or a republic. So, again, this is not a direct democracy. This is where we elect people to make decisions for us. So, first of all, in an indirect democracy, there is worth of the individual, and that is that all people or all persons are entitled to life, liberty, and due process. So we're very individual rather than collectively. In a democracy and in an indirect representative republic, there is the worth of the individual. Number two, equality. It's the idea that all persons are entitled to equal rights and equal treatment under the law. Citizenship, all persons born in the United States. When we get into the Constitution, we're going to talk about that's in the 14th Amendment. And I'm sure you learned that from Mrs. Matlock or whoever you had for U.S. history, which would be Miss Matlock. The 14th Amendment, that all people born in the United States, this was brought after the Civil War when the 13th Amendment freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment gives you birthright citizenship, so African Americans would not be considered property anymore. Non-citizens, what's the naturalization process? What do we do about people who are here legally and illegally? What is the pathway to citizenship to allow them to become citizens? Number five, majority rule. The will of the majority is expressed through elections. So if you don't like how things are going, that's one of the things that's going on right now with all these people burning these cities down and such. You know what? Don't burn your cities down. Go vote. And I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of these people who are upset that will not go vote. What's really sad is that to get 60 to 70% of the people who can vote, which is called the electorate, to vote in a presidential election is big. So you know what? If you want to make your voice heard, go out and vote. When we get into the political parties section, a lot of people think their vote doesn't count, but I've got some examples I'll show you that they most certainly do. Number six, minority rights. We must protect the rights of the few from oppression. So even though you may be in the minority, you still will be able to have a chance to express your opinion. Number seven, compromise. Look, government necessitates compromise by all sides. We saw this recently with President Trump. He signed an executive order because you had Congress fighting with each other, with Republicans and Democrats, over what to do on this unemployment to extend that out per week. Because people were getting $600 a week plus what they were getting normally on top for their unemployment. Some people were making $900 to $1,000 a week on unemployment. Well, that money ran out because we're starting to open up our economy back again. So the Republicans said, let's give people an extra $200 a week. The Democrats said, you know what, let's keep it at $600 a week. So Donald Trump compromised and came into the middle. So now we're getting $400. So there's an example of compromise. And then number eight, individual freedom. All persons are born free, equal, and independent. And I know I'm bombarding you with videos today, but I do want to show you a guy named Mark Robinson, who is from North Carolina. He is actually running for Attorney General, and he goes down to the Greensboro City Council, and he gives a speech here. It's pretty fiery, and I think this will show you. This is kind of an idea of how democracy really works.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes. I didn't have time to
You have to give us your name.
I'm sorry. My name is Mark Robinson. I live at 4015 Sassafras Court. That's right here in Greensboro. I've lived in Greensboro all my life. I didn't have time to write a fancy speech. I didn't have time to, I didn't have the resource of an English teacher to sit down and write a speech with at school today and be, brought over here or practice or anything. What I really came down here for is this. I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group, and domestic violence and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And here's who the majority is. I'm the majority. I'm a law-abiding citizen who's never shot anybody, never committed a serious crime, never committed a felony. I've never done anything like that. But it seems like every time we have one of these shootings, nobody wants to put the blame where it goes, which is at the shooter's feet. You want to put it at my feet. You want to turn around and restrict my right, constitutional right that's spelled out in black and white, You want to restrict my right to buy a firearm and protect myself from some of the very people you're talking about in here tonight. It's ridiculous. I don't think Rod Serling could come up with a better script. It does not make any sense. The law-abiding citizens of this community and many communities around this country, we're the first ones taxed and the last ones considered and the first ones punished when things like this happens, because our rights are the ones that are being taken away. That's the reason why I came down here today. Gun show or no gun show, NRA or no NRA. I'm here to stand up for the law-abiding citizens of this community, because I'm going to tell you that what's going to happen. You can take the guns away from us all you want to. You all write a law, I follow the law, I'll bring my guns down here, I'll turn them in. But here's what's going to happen. The Crips and the Bloods on the other side of town, they're not going to turn their guns in. They're going to hold on to them. And what's going to happen when you have to send the police down there to go take them? The police can barely enforce the law as it is. As what I see, we demonize the police, criminalize and vilify the police, and we make the criminals into victims. And we're talking about restricting guns? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that when the police department's already hamstrung? You're not going to be able to go down here and take these guns from these criminals. So the criminals are going to hold on to their guns. They're still going to have them. They're still going to break in my house, and they're still going to shoot me with them. And guess who's going to be the one that suffers? It's going to be me. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight, it is not going to happen without a fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean shots fired. I don't mean fist thrown. I mean I'm going to come down here to this city council and raise hell just like these loonies from the left do until you listen to the majority of the people in this city. And I am the majority. The majority of the people in this city are law-abiding, and they follow the law, and they want their constitutional right to be able to bear arms. They want to be able to go to the gun show and buy a hunting rifle or a sport rifle. There are no military-grade weapons sold at the gun show. An AR-15 is not a military-grade weapon. Anybody that would go into combat with an AR-15 is a fool. It's a semi-automatic .22 rifle. You'd be killed in 15 minutes in combat with that thing. So we need to dispel all these myths, and we need to drop all this division that we got going on here. Because the bottom line is, when that Second Amendment was written, whether the framers liked it or not, they wrote it for everybody. And I am everybody. And the law-abiding citizens of this city are everybody. And we want our rights, and we want to keep our rights. And by God, we're going to keep them, come hell or high water.
All right, so that's a pretty fiery speech there, talking about I am the majority. So the second part of this is the federal government. And again, we'll get into this more when we get into federalism and the Constitution. And so you have your United States Constitution, and then you have below that your acts of Congress, your state constitutions, all the way down to your city and your county ordinances. We are in a presidential system. Remember, we talked before about the difference between a presidential system and a parliamentary system. And then capitalism. We have a somewhat mixed market economy with government regulation. All right, so this takes us to lesson 4, the origins of American government. And we're just going to cover just a little bit of this. So the early European settlers brought 3 main ideas about government. Number 1, they brought ordered government. So units of government such as sheriffs, juries, and counties. And you can see all the counties there throughout Virginia. Number 2, the idea of limited government. Government is restricted in what it can do. And you know what? That's something we really struggle with today, and that's one of the principles of the Constitution we'll get later on. But do we really have limited government? I mean, think about everything that's happened, recently with all this coronavirus stuff and all these stimulus checks and things that we're getting, and the government really stepping in and making decisions. I mean, we're not in school because of the mandates that the government has put down throughout the states. So is that really limited government? I'm not arguing for or against it. I'm just making a point. Number 3, representative government. Government serves the will of the people, and it serves that will through the representatives. Other influences, you have the Code of Hammurabi. So if you took that in World History Part 1, the Babylonians, it was a system of written laws that were pretty strict, kind of the old eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In Athens, you had a direct democracy. Remember, we talked about that before. The Athenians really took democracy pretty seriously. For example, if you did not engage in politics, if you did not go and vote at the Acropolis on Friday nights, a slave would chase you down and then they would smear you with red paint. So again, they took their voting pretty serious. And then in Rome, you have an indirect democracy, which is what we have. You have the Roman Senate, you had the Roman Assembly. So again, today, whether we do that through a town council, board of supervisors, school board, all the way up to the president of the United States, we have an indirect democracy. John Locke, you remember him from U.S. history. Well, in World History Part 2 as well, he came up with the idea of natural rights, which are life, liberty, and property. They cannot be taken away. They are not given to you by the government. They're given to you by God. Those are rights that derive from nature, and they can't be taken away. You have Rousseau, who talked about the equality of men. Thomas Hobbes came up with the social contract. And of course, Hobbes was one of those guys that actually didn't believe in democracy. He believed in a dictator because he didn't think that people were they were too corruptible to be able to govern themselves. And then Montesquieu was a French philosopher who came up with the idea of separation of power. So it's the idea that you can have a central government, power centrally located in one place, but then you have three different branches. So you got your executive, your legislative, and judicial. So therefore, you don't have a dictator or somebody controlling all the power. And so you see a chart here of our influential political theorist. And then this is the origins of the separation of powers, which basically takes you all the way from Aristotle all the way down to the framers of our Constitution. So let's talk about the Magna Carta. Simply put, the Magna Carta means the Great Charter. And this was something that King John signed against his will because what it did was it limited the power of government. And it gave fundamental rights. So think about the things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the freedom to practice whatever religion you want. A lot of the basis came in this Magna Carta. You have a trial by jury. What's important about that is that if you have a judge, one person can determine whether you're guilty or not. But if you have a jury that's usually around 12 people, then what happens is 12 people have to be convinced that you're guilty. And if there's just one person who doesn't think so, then your odds are a whole lot better that you're not going to be convicted. Due process of law means there has to be a certain process that you go through. You can't just be arrested and thrown in prison for 3 months for doing whatever. You have to be told why you're being charged. You have to be booked. You have to be able to make bail and get your day in court. And there's a process to that. And that's where due process comes from. And then this led to the creation of Parliament, which is the legislative body of Britain. So now it's not just a king and a monarchy. Now they have a constitutional monarchy. And even today, as I mentioned before, the king and queen really have very little power as far as actually making government laws. They have no power. They do have some influence. But so now you have the English Petition of Rights, which is an early document supporting the idea that men have rights, establishing the concept of the rule of law, basically meaning that everybody has to follow the law. Just because of your position, just because you are in power, doesn't make you exempt from the law. It included the basic rights of guaranteeing a trial by jury. So again, your fate is in the hands of 12 people rather than one person, which is much more fair because again, you got to convince 12 people of something rather than just one. Protection against martial law. Martial law is basically every man for himself. It's the idea that the government could do that. So let's say, for example, we have a major disaster, a hurricane hits, or even during this coronavirus, and if martial law was declared, and let's say that I run a convenience store. Well, under martial law, really, there are no laws. It's the idea that it's basically every man's for himself. So there's no law preventing you from coming in and robbing my store. But there's also no law for me shooting you for trying to steal stuff. So you can imagine just the chaos that would happen under martial law. There's protection against quartering of troops. Think about the word headquarters. Quartering of troops means that the government can force you to let soldiers stay in your house. We're actually protected by that in the Third Amendment. It's one of the amendments that not a lot of people give attention to in the Bill of Rights, but that's what quartering of troops is. And then protection of private property. That is your property can't be taken away. The English Bill of Rights limited the power of the monarch. So again, we're trying to limit the power of a king or queen. We're going to try to make this more democratic, having decisions made through representatives. There was no standing army in peacetime. You had free elections. So again, think about how important that is. I mean, right now there's a debate in this country about mail-in voting, which the big issue I have with that is I worry about the fraud that's involved. But think about that, everybody being able to vote in an election. The right of petition, meaning that you have the right to challenge your government if you think that it's doing wrong things to you or to others. There's a parliamentary checks on power. So again, that goes back to our checks and balances. It's the idea that one branch of the government can check the other one to make sure that one branch is not too powerful. All right, all right, guys. So that finishes everything up for today. We'll see you tomorrow.